So, how many people here drive trucks? How many people came here in cars? How many people came here in bicycles?
No one.
One of the things that I decided we were going to do is taking off on. Jim Worthen and I did a show the other day called Closing Down Main Street, and I thought that was an appropriate title to use. By the way, I urge you to look at his video because I think it's good. It's not because I was on it. So the bottom line is, I brought a whiteboard here that has a diagram on it. And it was one of those things where you're cleaning out the closet, right? And you haven't seen something in 10 or 15 years. And there it is. That was a whiteboard for a presentation that I gave in 2003. The issue here is nothing's changed. Okay? Now, on the left-hand side, you see this X here, and it's called the crossover theory. You have a demographic that's going this way and it starts to go down, and then you have another demographic that goes up, and you get a crossover of the two social events. The issue is, who's going to win? Okay? And generally it's the new item that's brought along, not because it's better, but because it's new. Okay? How many times have you heard the Bicycle Coalition and anti-car people say, it's new, we're going to change the streets? Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
Then over here, on the right-hand side, there's this, it looks like a badly drawn mountain. On the very right left-hand side of the mountain is 1975. At the top of the mountain is 1980. There's an item underneath here, 1990 to 2000, which is towards the bottom of the drop-off of the mountain. And then at the very end, you have 2003 when this graph was created. Ladies and gentlemen, that happens to be the demographics associated with the bicycle use in Santa Barbara County. These are the numbers that were created by the Bicycle Coalition in concert with the city of Santa Barbara. The 1975 is the baseline study for bicyclists in the city of Santa Barbara. Is approximately 1,400 bicycles. 0 bicycle paths, by the way. In 1980, at the top of the mountain, there was over 1,800 bicyclists counted in the city of Santa Barbara. 0 bicycle paths. Approximately 1990, the city of Santa Barbara and the Bicycle Coalition got a hold of them and said, we're going to start putting bike paths in, and the reason we're putting bike paths in is because more people will ride if it's safer for them. Well, that's not the issue, and I'll explain to you in a second. Then in 1990, it started dropping off, and in 2003, the last bicycle count done by the city of Santa Barbara with the Bicycle Coalition, with Drusilla Van Hingel, the head of alternative transportation for the city of Santa Barbara, and a board member of the Bicycle Coalition, was 1,300 bicyclists. Now remember, 1975 was 1,400 bicyclists and there weren't any bicycle paths. By 2013, the city of Santa Barbara had built well over $25 million worth of bike paths. $25 million. Narrowed streets down, and it was affecting businesses in the area. So that's what you have going on here, and nothing's changed. So how do they shut down State Street? How do they shut down Main Street? How do they shut down Old Town Hollister? It's very simple. They start taking away the capacity of the streets to carry automobiles. Those automobiles, by the way, carry customers and tourists and people that are going to buy. And this is exactly what happened. If you take a look at 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, there's a classic example of massive failure. 3rd Street Promenade, they have failed so badly in creating customers downtown. They've now taken the parking garage next door that they built to handle all the customers. They've turned it into housing because they don't have enough people coming in the 3rd Street Promenade. But the 3rd Street Promenade is one of those areas that the city of Santa Barbara and others point to and say, this is what we have to have because look how wonderful it worked. They haven't looked at the last 10 years. So that's what's going on. 20s, Jim was what, 40 years ago when Dave Davis was Community Development Director of the City of Santa Barbara. He came in and said, we have this new company in San Francisco and they go do land use planning and they've come up with a great idea for Santa Barbara. And we're going to take State Street, take the 4 lanes of traffic and remove it. 50% of it's gone. And we're going to widen the sidewalks and we're going to put trees on it and everybody's going to think it's wonderful. Well, guess what? Everybody did think it was wonderful. Dave Davis, who is now the head of the MTD, he constantly floats around in the circle, made the statement that in the first 3 blocks of State Street, which were from Victoria down to Carrillo, if it did not improve the economic atmosphere of the businesses in downtown Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara wouldn't retrofit. Understand? This means taking everything out that they put in, pulling it back out, putting the 4 lanes of traffic back up. The businesses started failing within 5 years. And they started going, wait a minute, this isn't what we were told was going to happen. We want your promise. We want this street taken back. The city refused to do it. They basically just ignored any of the complaints. And Dave Davis, and I want you to listen to this comment. It just has to be bigger to make it work. This is what they said about the 3rd Street Promenade. This is what they said up in San Jose where it's not working. This is what they said in San Francisco, where San Francisco is now actually in worse condition than the State Street is. And by the way, the terminology for most of us that live in Santa Barbara is not State Street. It's called Death Valley. And it's kind of a joke, it's kind of a funny thing, but it's not funny when you think of all the retail businesses that used to be there, that aren't there anymore, and all the middle-class retail businesses that were providing jobs for people that aren't there anymore. And the city of Santa Barbara was just projected to have it between a $7 and $10 million deficit for this year. Think about that. So they took away State Street and the parking. They took away the 4 lanes of travel. They took away all the nice things that I remember growing up. And they said, this is how wonderful it's going to be. Well, it got down to De La Guerra, and it wasn't working. And they had Ott's Old Town Mall. Anybody remember Ott's Old Town Mall? Okay. Owned by the Ott's family. It was one of the few places that was able to survive. And one of the reasons it was able to survive is because it was down at the bottom where the streets still worked. De La Guerra went all the way through, and there was a parking lot right next to Ott's Old Street Mall that was owned by Ott's Old Street Mall. So the people would come in and park and do their shopping. Well, that's gone. They did away with De La Guerra. As far as between Chapala and State Street, they hampered the circulation element, and it was part of another situation. And what was Dave Davis's comment? It has to be bigger to work. Does that sound familiar? And then when the city of Santa Barbara turned around and said, okay, we were going to build ourselves a shopping center. Who owned the land that the shopping center of Paseo Nuevo now sits on? Anybody?
City.
No. No.
Private.
Jerry Beaver. He owned the old Piccadilly and so forth down there, and he told the city of Santa Barbara, you want a shopping center, I will build it for you. It will not cost you a dime. Just give us the permits and I will create and build the shopping center for you. And the city of Santa Barbara said, well, let's put it this way. If you have 4 fingers and you take down 3, that's what the city of Santa Barbara told Jerry Beaver. So the city expropriated the property. No, not your index finger. And the city of Santa Barbara expropriated the property, and then had people come in and like Gil Garcia and Alex Pujo and the rest. Well, we have to create an identical item similar to the old Paseo on the other side of the street. So they created this windy shopping center. It has lousy parking. And what happened to it? Well, within the first 10 years, every month, the city of Santa Barbara was writing a check between $40,000 and $45,000 to cover the construction note that the city had to take out to build that piece of junk. Okay? Then it started to make some money. They were able to entice some people in, and people were kind of going, well, this is kind of cool. We'll go down there. Then afterwards, people started realizing, oh, and by the way, the city's in the process of marrying Chapala right next to Paseo Nuevo. The city built a parking garage underneath that is absolutely terrible. I mean, it's one of the worst run parking lots, or designed parking lots in the city of Santa Barbara. They took the parking off of Chapala Street. So what happens? They killed the area right in front of Paseo Nuevo, which is Main Street. How to kill Main Street? You take commercial, you take tourists, you don't allow them to drive, you don't allow them to park, and then you say, we will give you a bus. Well, guess what happened to the bus shuttle system? The bus shuttle system, you know, who was, Jim, remind me, do you remember who the female head of MTD was, the paid director, during that time? Okay. Now this is a woman that started driving buses for MTD. She worked her way all the way up to being the paid director. She and I became friends. And she couldn't say that we were friends, but we would meet off in different locations. Quite often it was over at the CBS at Kylie Rouse and State Street. And I go, Sherry Fisher. And I go, Sherry, what's going on? She said, it's terrible. She said, the city of Santa Barbara is demanding we put more and more things on the streets that don't make sense. Now, at the time, Cars Are Basic had a wonderful board member, Tom Becker. Tom Becker was one of these savants. You show him numbers, he looked down at it and he said, it'll work or won't work. And he could do it in 5 minutes. And he took a look at what was going on and said, this isn't going to work. And then the city of Santa Barbara turned around and said, I know what we'll do is we will put electric shuttles on the street and we will spend millions of dollars to do this. But what happened? People didn't ride it. And so the shuttles were very expensive and they were going around and around. And then the city said, we've got a better idea. We're going to come in and we're going to replace those electric shuttles with all electric buses. They'll be sawed-off little buses, and they'll have air conditioning on them, and people will ride them because they're air conditioned, they're warm in the winter, they're cooled in the summertime. And what happened to those shuttles? Nobody used them. And the numbers went down. One of the reasons the numbers went down is because the tourists and the shoppers, the locals that used to shop on Main Street were no longer there. And so they had to get rid of the shuttles on State Street. The bike packs, wonderful bike packs. You know, now you're talking to an exercise physiologist. I used to, before my legs went bad on me, I used to bike 50 to 70 miles a week, every week. And I started doing this when I just got out of the Army, which was around 1972. And I did it till I was about 65. Every single week, and on holidays I'd do over 100 miles. As an exercise physiologist and a bicyclist, I can tell you, the Bicycle Coalition has had what they're sitting on. They have been absolute liars. They lied about the bicycle usage. They lied about the bicycle pass. They have been using the taxpayers' money to lie to you. And I would hope somebody from the Bicycle Coalition would like to sue me, because I would walk away with their rental property that they own on Haley Street. I will go into their bank account. I'll take the gold out of their teeth and the cheap suits off their backs. I don't like these people. And the reason I don't like them is because they have been repeatedly liars. And it's one thing to say, I don't agree with you. It's another thing to lie to the public and then turn around and have the Bicycle Coalition take, just in the last 10 years, over $500,000 of taxpayer money. $386,000 from Doss Williams. For what? To make their Safe Routes to School program work and to have more kids riding bikes. Ed France in 2016, when Doss Williams was on the city council, stated that the 5-year Safe Routes to School program had failed. Okay, and the only reason he had to do that is because I was in the city council at that meeting, and I stood up and I called him on it. I said, we've been monitoring has this worked? And he had to admit. Ed France was an honors graduate from the Bryn School out here at UCSB, which is a land use planning group, and they're a bunch of jerks. The former dean of the Bryn School used to come to our meetings. The last time he showed up was about three months ago, maybe 4 months ago. It was the last meeting we had at IHOP. And he sat there, and I recognized him. I said, hey, how you doing? I'm glad you showed up. People are welcome to come to our meetings, whether they agree with us or not. And here he is, retired, and he had to admit to me that well over after 15 years, that his planning, his concept of transportation and bike use had not worked. How many times are the public going to be lied to? How many times are you going to elect people like Snedden at the City Council of Santa Barbara? She's a millionaire. Her husband gets a high six-figure salary through the county of Santa Barbara and promotes alternative transportation. How about, oh, I know, the Gutierrezes, Oscar and Alejandra. The only reason they can make it in the city of Santa Barbara is because they're getting $50-some thousand a year, plus benefits, plus per diem. They can't make it in this town unless they have those city council seats. Then you have Mikey Jordan. I love Mikey Jordan. Mikey is a liar. He's a cheat. He used to be on the planning commission in the city of Santa Barbara. He would come up with programs and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And cars would basically go to the planning commission and say, yeah, but how's this thing working over on Castillo Street? How's this working down on the shuttle program down on the waterfront? How is, and oh, well, they're working fine, but we have answers, and these are going to work. It just has to be bigger. Okay? You're starting to get the theme. So now he's gone from the planning commission, he's now at the city council. Now here's how bad he is. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. One of our board members actually is a longtime Democrat, and his family's heavily involved on the East Coast in the Democrat National Party. He's a good friend. Love him to death. Mikey Jordan has upset so many Democrats in the city of Santa Barbara that they now email me with comments to the effect of, we had no idea what we were electing. This is what's happening to shut down Main Street. They don't care. They have looked around and said, this is environmental. Well, we have to do something. After all, this pollution issue has gotten so bad, we can't stand it any longer, and the Earth is going to turn into a crispy critter. Here's something to think about. In 2000, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, stated that if the state of California did nothing more to change the internal combustion automobile, that 100%, not 99%, but 100% of all the air pollution as measured in Southern California in 1960 would have been taken away. They were right. Now, I want you to think about this. Why are you continuing to hear about air pollution and the issues of health when in fact there are more hybrid cars, there are more electric cars on the streets? You have fewer, like my 66 Mustang outside, on the street. Okay? The parts per million, both of particles and hydrocarbons, is so low now that you could go forever and not meet, I want you to think about this, not meet the hydrocarbon emissions that nature produced when Gabriel and the Spanish came up the coast. What do you mean? Well, you had, why is Carpinteria called Carpinteria? Because they had the tar pits down there and the Trumans were using it to build things. You had La Brea tar pits. You have a channel that was so leaking oil and gas in the channel as the Spanish were going up the coast that they had to clean the bottom of their boats off. How do I know? One of my majors happens to be history, and one of my minor happened to be California history. They're shutting down State Street and they're killing off the program. Well, what about this issue of global warming? Global warming, this is terrible. I want you to think about this. Iceland, I don't know if you saw the latest news things, has a massive, massive volcanic issue going on. They just showed, I think it was about a week ago, the latest fissure that's going down the main part of their island. It's opened up a couple of miles long, and this volcanic stuff is coming off. Well, that's unusual. No, it's not, folks. The scientists hired by their government saw what was happening well over 20 years ago. And so they hired some of the best in the world. And what they did is they came in and they started doing core samples of all the glaciers that they had. Because they wanted to find out what's the truth of this. And on a NOAA series, these people are saying, by the way, we make the estimate that the global warming people are off by 2 to 4 degrees. I want you to think about that. Because people are talking, well, the Earth is warmed up and it's almost at that 2-degree area, and now we're going to turn into crispy critters. The problem is that when they did the ice samples, they were able to do carbon dioxide, they were able to do oxygen, they were able to do particulate matter, and by the concentration of the ice, they were able to do the temperature. The temperature that they came up on the average over thousands of years, if not millions of years, is 4 degrees higher than what the alarmists have been talking about. Think about that. If they're off, even by 2 degrees, that means everybody that's been shooting their mouths off has decided to ignore the Icelandic government and their very strong scientific estimates and measurements. So let's turn down and do away with Main Street. So what's going to happen in Hollister, out here in Old Town, in Goleta? Cars are basically heard about this what we consider to be an idiotic plan well over 15 years ago. And one of the plans was to put roundabouts on either side of 217 on Hollister. The last item presented to SBCAG for their money was, we will put the roundabouts on Hollister to enhance the efficiency of automobiles and trucks to move on Hollister. Now they want to make things work better, right? They then turned around and said, oh, by the way, we want to take $8 million off of an overpass bridge. We want to put it down into Old Town Hollister so we can narrow the street down. So they're going to increase the capacity on either side of 217 and then take 50% of the capacity off of Hollister. How to kill Main Street. It's going to happen exactly like it happened in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara, for those of you that remember in the 40s and 50s and early 60s, had an awful lot of blue-collar businesses on State Street. They aren't there, haven't been there for years. Goleta is the last cohesive blue-collar district in all of South County. It's Old Town Goleta. Okay? CAB came up with an alternative to the city of Goleta's plan. Number one, leave Old Town Hollister alone. Leave the four lanes on. Number two, when it comes to the roundabouts, which have already been approved, they're in the process of getting ready to dig up the street and put them in. On the Old Town side, instead of putting in the roundabout there, just take the off-ramp coming off of 217, meld it into the road that is, serves the condos there. Dearborn, and then put one intersection on an off-ramp, off-ramp coming onto Hollister. You just solved the problem of people backing up. Okay? So you solved that problem with one thing. Guess what the city of Goleta is going to do? They're going to put that off-ramp into Dearborn, and then so they only have one entrance into the roundabout, because they knew that the roundabout would crunch down if they had two entrances on the roundabout at that location. So they've taken the CAB idea that they rejected, they're putting it in there, and they're still going to put the roundabout. Now, on the other side of 217, the Santa Barbara side, you're going to have another roundabout. Well, what's the issue there? I mean, it's going to help traffic move. Yeah, well, maybe, but the roundabout's going to be a one-lane roundabout. It's not going to be 2 lanes. Number two, CAB came up and said, we have a better idea for you. And thank you, Tom Becker. Tom was amazing when it came to design and understanding. He said, instead of taking a roundabout to put people onto that on-ramp to 217, you take and put a clover leaf coming up over the bridge. You then eliminated the issue of people taking a left turn and interfering with pedestrians and bicyclists. Well, if you solve that issue, what's right down, oh, that's right, where the clover leaf would go, that's Ward Avenue, isn't it? Is that the right name?
Ward Drive.
Ward Drive. Okay? The city of Goleta put an unnecessary bike path in there and took 50% of the parking off of it. So now they have a dedicated bike lane. It would have increased the safety of bicyclists. But who cares? They have $8 million they just got from SB CAG. They had the other grant money, and they're going to go ahead and do it. They don't care. Now, I've talked with Perotti, Kiriakis, Wright, and other members of both staff and the city council. They don't care for me. I said, what are you going to do? How are you going to kill Old Town Hollister? Because that's what's going to happen. Are you looking at what happened to Death Valley? Boy, they really didn't like me calling State Street Death Valley. Have you looked at what's happened to Carpinteria Avenue? Now remember, I was born and raised here. I remember when Carpinteria was nothing more than an ag station, okay, with a bunch of barracks in it. And Carp Avenue was what was part of the freeway. When the city of Carpinteria was formed, they took over Carp Avenue, which was part of the freeway. They had a nice wide street with parking capable of handling traffic. And then what did they start doing? Does anybody, can you say bulb outs? Do you know what a bulb out is? Anybody doesn't know what a bulb out is? It's a curb extension, okay? So it's generally put on a corner and it's forced out into the street. Well, the curb extension is there to make it easier and safer for pedestrians to walk, okay? That's a great idea. Can you prove it? The city of Santa Barbara can't prove it. The city of Carpinteria can't prove it. The city of Goleta can't prove it. The county of Santa Barbara can't prove it. SBCAG, the County Association of Governments, can't prove it. And the city of Santa Maria can't prove it. Why? Because there is no long-term statistical evidence that proves that pedestrians are safer with bulb outs in the streets. Think about it. We're going to put those in. If it's a 3-foot bulb out, it costs you around $50,000. If it's a 6-foot bulb out, double that cost. If it's a bulb out that includes the drainage, the street drains, start doubling that $150,000 to $300,000 because you have massive increases in inflation for cement, steel, and all the rest of it. Now, Drusilla Van Hingel, PhD, UC Irvine, former Olympian. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a member of the Bicycle Coalition. Why did she want to put bulb outs in the streets of the city of Santa Barbara? Anybody? Well, yeah, in part. But in an open mic moment at a Transportation Circulation Committee meeting, she didn't realize the mic was still on, and I had just unrelentingly hammered her. And she being an Olympian, an athlete, top level and all the rest of it, she couldn't stand anybody standing up to her. But she forgot who she was dealing with. The open mic moment was, we want the bulb outs so we can force bicyclists into the street and then slow the traffic. She was willing to use bicyclists as cannon fodder to slow down streets. Now, Drusilla Van Hingel also was great friends with the Environmental Defense Center. And I can now say this because the person has left the area and so forth. I won't identify the person, but I had a lunch meeting with this individual, and she made the comment, "You have no idea what's coming down the pike." I said, "Yeah, I think I pretty much do." She said, "Do you know that they plan on destroying all the streets in Santa Barbara?" I said, "Yeah." Matter of fact, I had already talked with a city of Santa Barbara civil service staff member. I asked her to forward me information under a CAPRA request, and she said, fine. She said, look, you have to understand, they're going to destroy the streets of Santa Barbara. Now, this is independent of hearing Drusilla Van Hingel, hearing the junk that came out of the Environmental Defense Center, the junk that came out of the Bicycle Coalition. This is what's happening. They are killing State Street, which is Main Street, and they're doing it for environmental reasons they cannot support. I'm a research scientist. I was active exercise physiologist. I was doing very sophisticated research at Cottage Hospital. I had the #1 person at GE MRI, top PhD in the world, come up to me one day and he says, "You know exactly what you're doing, keep going." So I know something about the scientific method. And I know when people are shoveling you know what. And the environmental community has been shoveling it for decades. They want what they want. They don't care what the outcome's going to be. They don't care what's going to happen to the businesses. This is why you have to be willing to stand up to these people. And I know it's not pleasant. Standing up to a bunch of people that are elected officials, standing up to people that have been hired to promote the destruction of traffic grids is not pleasant. I've done it, I've had it. I mean, I've had them come at me like you wouldn't believe it. So now that I've made my comments, my understanding of how the world works